All right, here's our third video in section 4.8. We just got done doing an example where we divided by a binomial. Remember that long division? Here are the steps again to divide polynomials by a binomial. Step number one is we're going to divide our first term by the first term. We're then going to multiply the result by the entire divisor. We're going to subtract, so we're going to draw our line, change our signs, and combine, making sure you change the sign to everything. We're going to bring down the next term, and we're going to repeat. Let's practice another one. Here's example number 4. I'd like you to take a 2x squared plus 5x minus 1 and divide it by 2x minus 1. You notice really carefully that it's not just one term, there's two terms. So I can't just divide it by a 2x, and I can't just divide it by a minus 1. I've got to divide it by the whole thing. So let's do our long division. Let's take our 2x squared plus 5x minus 1 and divide it by 2x minus 1 using long division. Let's take our first term and divide it by our first term. So off to the side, if I had a 2x squared and I wanted to divide it by 2x, wouldn't the 2's cancel each other out? And then if I have an x squared divided by an x, wouldn't that just be 1x? All right, so I'm going to put that 1x at the top, and I'm going to multiply that by the entire divisor. Remember, make sure that you do each term. So x times 2x is 2x squared, and x times negative 1 is negative 1x. Now I'm going to draw my line and subtract, which means I have to make sure I change the sign here, and I need to change the sign here. Remember, when you subtract a negative, it really changes to a positive. My 2x squared minus 2x squared cancel. That should always happen, by the way. If it doesn't cancel, you did something wrong. So be careful with that. That's kind of a clue that you're doing it right. All right, let's keep going. I've got a 5x plus 1x. That's really a 6x. And then I'm going to bring this negative 1 down. Let's do that same process one more time. Let's take our 6x and let's divide it by our 2x. Let's take this first term and divide it by this first term. All right, if I have a 6 divided by 2, I end up getting 3. My x's cancel each other out, and so I actually just get a 3 there, a positive 3. So make sure you put that plus sign separating your terms. Let's take this 3 and multiply it through by my divisor. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. And then remember, I'm going to draw my line and subtract. I'm going to change the sign here, and I'm going to change the sign here. My 6x and negative 6x cancel. I've got a negative 1 plus 3. That gives me a positive 2. Uh-oh, you've noticed. What happened here? There we go. You notice that there is no other term to bring down, but I don't have a 0, which means on this one, I actually have a remainder. So here's how we're going to write it. Since it's a positive 2, we have a remainder of 2 over my 2x minus 1, over my divisor. And so my final answer would be x plus 3 plus 2 over 2x minus 1. A little bit of a remainder on that one, which is different than the first example that we looked at. Let's do another one. This one's also a little bit different. All right, on this one, it's asking us to divide x cubed plus 1 divided by x plus 1. You notice that we're dividing by a binomial, so I can't just divide by x and I can't just divide by 1. This tells me that we have to do long division. But if you notice, my polynomial that I'm dividing into has some missing pieces. Do you notice that there is no x squared missing, or there is an x squared missing, and there's an x term missing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill those in with zeros. So that way I can keep my place and keep my columns organized. So that's the first thing that we always want to double check, is to make sure that we have all of our terms. If we're missing any of our terms, we have to make sure that we fill them in with zeros so that I can keep their space. All right, here we go. Let's change to red. All right, what is x cubed divided by x? Well, x cubed divided by x is really x squared, right? All right, so I have an x squared. Let's multiply that through. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 1 is 1x squared. I'm going to draw my line. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to change my sign here, and I'm going to change my sign here. My x cubed minus x cubed cancel. I have a 0x squared minus 1x squared. That gives me a minus 1x squared. Do you see how it was important to put a 0x squared so that I have an x squared column when I'm doing my long division? That's going to help a lot. I'm going to bring down my next term, which is just a 0x, and that's okay. And then I'm going to follow my same process. So I'm going to take this term and multiply it by x. So what's negative 1x squared divided by x? Looks like I have a negative 1x left over, right? So I have a negative 1x that I'm going to distribute through. Negative x times x is negative x squared, or negative 1x squared, you can say. Negative x times 1 is negative 1x. I'm going to draw my line, and I'm going to change my signs. I'm going to subtract a negative, which turns into a positive. I'm going to subtract a negative, which turns into another positive. If you notice, just like we're supposed to happen, I have a negative 1x squared plus a 1x squared, so they cancel. And now I have a 0x plus 1x, which is just a 1x left over. I'm going to bring down my last term and do the process one more time. Here we go. I have 1x divided by x, which is just 1, isn't it? All right, positive 1. 1 times x is 1x. 1 times 1 is 1. I'm going to draw my line. I'm going to subtract or change my signs. If you look at, oh, look what happens. I've got a 1x minus 1x, which cancel. And then I have a 1 minus 1, which also cancel. That leaves me with 0. Nothing else to bring down, so I have no remainder, and so my final answer would be x squared minus 1 plus 1. Again, what that really means is if you were to take that x squared minus x plus 1 and multiply it by the x plus 1, FOIL distribute, you should end up getting back the polynomial that you started with, the x cubed plus 1. All of your terms should cancel, and you should be left with an x cubed plus 1. That's a way to double check that you got the right answer. All right, that's kind of tricky, so make sure that you practice. The more you practice, the easier it's going to be, the less mistakes you're going to make. But remember, if you're missing any terms, you need to make sure that you fill them in with 0 so that you can keep their columns in order. Make sure that you practice that a couple of times before moving on to the next example, okay? All right, let's look at this next one before we do our next video. It says we're going to take our 9a squared plus a cubed minus 5, and we're going to divide it by a squared minus 1. You notice that there's two terms there, so it's a binomial. But you also notice that there's a term missing. And so when I go to do my long division, I want to make sure that I fill in those missing terms with a 0. So I'm going to take my a cubed, I wrote it in standard form, then my 9a squared. You notice that there was no a, so I'm going to fill it in with a 0a minus 5. And I'm going to divide it by a squared plus 0a minus 1 so that I can make sure that I have all the columns that I need and no columns or terms are missing. Here we go. Let's do purple. All right. How many times does a squared go into a cubed? What's a cubed divided by a squared? I just get an a, right? So a times a squared is a cubed. A times 0a, be careful, it's 0a squared, right? 1 times 0 is 0, a squared. And then I have an a times negative 1, which is negative 1a. That way I make sure that I have all the columns that I need. Do you remember what the next step is? Yeah, we're going to draw our line and we're going to subtract. I'm going to subtract here. I'm going to subtract this term. And I'm going to subtract this term. I'm going to change my signs to everything. Be careful with that. My a cubed minus a cubed cancels. 9a squared minus 0a squared is just a 9a squared. 0a plus 1a is just a 1a. And then I'm going to bring down my negative 5. All right, let's do it again. I'm going to take the 9a squared and divide it by a squared. So 9a squared divided by a squared is just 9, isn't it? A positive 9. All right, let's multiply it through. 9 times a squared is 9a squared. 9 times 0a, 9 times 0. Be careful, it's 0a, isn't it? Not 9. 9 times 0 is 0a. And 9 times negative 1 is negative 9. Let's draw our line and subtract each term. My 9a squared minus 9a squared cancel. 1a minus 0a is just a 1a. Negative 5 plus 9 is a positive 4. Uh-oh, it looks like there's nothing to bring down. I'm done. And so because I have extra, that means I have a remainder. I have a remainder of an a plus 4 over my divisor, my a squared minus 1. So this would be my final answer. I just have a little bit of a remainder there. All right, that one was kind of tricky. You had missing terms in both pieces, both polynomials there. So make sure that if there is any pieces missing anywhere, that you fill them in with zeros. Practice, practice, practice. I know it's kind of tricky, but I want you to try it, okay? All right. Why don't you try these before we move on to the next video? So pause the video, try these two before moving on, and let's see how you're doing. All right, on try it, the first one, I have an x squared minus 3x minus 10 divided by x minus 5. So I'm dividing by a binomial. That means I have to do my long division. All right, how many times does x go into x squared? Well, I get an x. I'm going to distribute that through. X times x is x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. And then I'm going to change my signs. My x squared and negative x squared cancel. Negative 3x plus 5 is 2x. I'm going to bring down my negative 10. And then I'm going to do it again. How many times does x go into 2x? Well, I get 2, positive 2. And let's take the 2 and distribute it through. 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. But then I'm going to change my signs, so my 2x changes to negative, and my 10 changes to positive. My 2x and negative 2x cancel. My negative 10 and positive 10 also cancel, so I have no remainder, and so my final answer is just x plus 2. Hopefully you got all of that right, and you showed all of your work so I can see exactly all of the different steps that you're doing. All right, let's try B. Now be careful. You notice in B that we're dividing by a binomial, so we have to do our long division. But if you notice, in this first polynomial here, we have a missing term. Hopefully you filled it in with a 0. So I have a 2x squared plus 0x minus 5 divided by x minus 1. All right, here we go. 2x squared divided by x is a 2x. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 1 is negative 2x. And then I'm going to subtract my terms. The 2x squared minus 2x squared cancel. 0x plus 2x gives me a 2x, and then I'm going to bring down my negative 5. All right, what's 2x divided by x? Positive 2, right? All right, let's distribute it through. 2 times x is 2x, and 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Remember to change your signs so that the 2x and the negative 2x cancel. I now have a negative 5 plus 2, which gives me a negative 3, right? I have nothing to bring down, so it looks like there's a remainder on this one. There's a remainder of a negative 3 over my x minus 1. Or you could actually write it as 2x plus 3 minus 3 over x minus 1. Either way would give you the same answer. All right, a little bit tricky. Make sure that you're practicing if you need more. You can always do extra practice in my math lab if you need it as well before moving on, okay?